Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this future seminar. My name is Toge Hanghøj. I'm the head of communication at the Institute, and we're very happy to have you here. Today we hope to serve an interesting exploration of a new book. I'll get back to the book in just a second, but before I do that, I would love for every one of you to write a comment in the comment section. Tell us where you're from, and please do participate in the discussion and the exploration about the future of work. We will make sure that our guest will answer some questions, and we would love for you to be a part of it. So let's get to it. We're joined today by Claus Sneppen. You are an associated partner here at the Institute, and the reason why you're here is that you have written a new book. I can show it here. It's called The Future Revolution of the Office Workspace. And welcome, Claus. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you for being here.
First of all, I would like to ask you, so who is this book for? Who can use this book? Who should read it?
Well, any leadership, any participant in defining the workplace and the office and how we work. So all the decision makers who have a stake in the workplace should read it.
Okay, so that's decision makers. Is it HR? Is it people and culture more than other departments?
No, but basically, one should think it's about designing an office. But as we're entering the hybrid workspace and we're becoming more flexible, in fact, it's a whole ecosystem of the workplace that we are touching and we're changing. So once you're not at the office all the time, it's not a question about how you design the office workspace. It's about how you design the whole ecosystem, whether you're there at the office or not.
Okay, so let's get to it. So can you start by giving us a brief introduction about what the book is about?
The book is sparked as we're all talking about, or a lot of people are talking about flexible work or remote work, and we have acquired more flexibility post-pandemic. So it's sparked by the pandemic, and we changed the way we addressed knowledge work and office work. We became more flexible. And the essence in this is it's possible due to a different track than the analog track, which is a digital track, where we can work remote. And the pandemic showed us that it was possible to work from home or from anywhere and still be productive. And some regard this as that the pandemic, it made the change, which is not true. It didn't even accelerate it. It just made it clear that we shifted our focus from going to work and having to be physical at a workspace. We could work from anywhere. And that hasn't changed as we go post-pandemic.
So is this what you mean when you, in the book, you have this sentence you write, work is something you do, not somewhere you go?
Well, it's not me. I'm quoting somebody else, but it's true. Work is not a place; it's an activity, and as an activity, it can be performed anywhere. And as we can meet up and we can collaborate in a digital sphere, it's not necessary all the time to be present at the office.
So if the pandemic was not the key driver in making this change that we have seen over the last few years, what has been the big drivers?
The digital track.
Yeah.
So and basically what I ask organizations or whoever I get in touch with is, do you believe that the world will become more digital or less? And the answer is obvious. And at the same time, I put that question into another frame, which is the office. So you believe that we have reached a stable evolution of the office as the digital office keep progressing fast, very fast. Then the analog office is more static. And what I'm basically arguing for in the book is that they are to be considered as a whole. You cannot just look at the analog office and say that's steady, and then we progress in the way we collaborate and work in the digital sphere. So they interact and they have to find their balance, and it's not static.
So if I were to put myself in the mind of people who own companies and who own workspace and who have employees, then perhaps I would say, but I want my employers to be at the office where I can see them and I can look them in the eyes and I can ask them questions. What do you think about that? They are the key decision makers, and perhaps there is a lot of people who would like to go back to the, let's call it the old way.
Well, I hear several questions in the one question that you put. First of all, to be blunt, going back to the past is not going to solve the future, which is, of course, quite popular saying coming from the Institute. But returning to the past and saying that the analog office is better than the digital, it's a misinterpretation of the development. It is easier to be a manager or a leader in the old office where we were using most of our time. It's easier to manage by sight, but that doesn't mean it's more productive. So there'll be organizations where you want to have people back in, and all the statistic and all the data shows that you lose employees because employees favor flexibility.
Yeah, so you lose employees if you force them
mandate them to come back.
Yeah, okay.
So the other question goes in whether you believe that the future will be analog or whether it's going to be predominantly analog, which is if you ask people to come in 4 days a week, then you're basically saying the world works better in an analog sphere when we're working. But at the same time, you're investing, and most companies are investing heavily in the digital infrastructure. And that doesn't add up. We all believe that digital infrastructure will make us more productive. Artificial intelligence, whatever. And if you're more productive and more efficient in the digital, then you have to adapt the analog to the digital and not reverse.
All right. So I want to...
Was that too complicated?
No, that was fine. I want to stick by one of the points you made. You say that if you mandate office workers to come back to the office after a period of them having the flexibility to work from home, then you will see some people leaving the job. I made a completely unscientific question to some of my friends who all work in offices across energy and property and media. And the basic discussion ended up being that every one of them wanted flexibility, but all of them also thought that 3 or 4 days in the office is the right balance to strike. So this is my small sample. Do you think that reflects a general consensus?
I think it reflects a general consensus at the present state we are in right now. Now, Denmark, we have a special legislation going into if you have more than 2 days at home working, you have to go through a standardization of your home workplace. It has to be approved. So in Denmark, the limit is normally 2 days. And if you enter other markets, other countries, it's different. So it's probably a reflection of what the market agreed upon at the present stage. But that doesn't answer the right question, which is which model is the most productive. Because if I ask most employees, they want more flexibility. They want to be able to decide when to go into the office and when not to go into the office. And on the other side, you have the organizations that seek productivity and at the same time, probably a management that put in vast resources into the office and the infrastructure, and they want to avoid having sunk cost. So they will have a predominant attitude towards this to come back into the office. But that will change over time. It'll change because, as I stated several times now, the situation is not static. And the reason why we're talking remote work at the level that we're talking about it right now, it's because it's possible. It's possible to collaborate. It's possible to work and be very productive and efficient working at a distance. And it's not going to be less in the future. It's going to be more.
So one of the arguments that we had in the discussion I just mentioned, and one of the arguments I've seen when the future of work is discussed in general, is that sure, there is a lot of digital work that can be managed from home, but if you really want, traction, and you really want innovation, and you really want active collaboration, then you need to sit physically together. What do you make of that argument?
Well, now we come into all the biases and all the myth of the workplace, and studies and cases. If you look upon them and study them in depth, they will show you that it's true that if you do not have an infrastructure or system, for example, innovation, that support innovation at a distance, you will lack innovation. But if you make the right systems and you make the right structures, which are not a replica of the past, but new structures and new systems, you can surpass the everyday analog presence and innovation. So it's a question about not trying to replicate the past, but build new systems and structures. And by doing so, you can be more innovative, you can be more collaborative, you can build stronger cultures. In fact, if you combine them in the right ratio. So it's not this binary approach where you say 0 or 1, and then you cherry pick and you say, we have to be in the office because that's the way we build a culture. And that's not true. It's not the best way to build a culture. The best way to build a culture is combining both remote and in presence at the right, what you can say, quantity and in balance. But then again, there's you cherry pick your arguments so they fit your purpose.
Okay, so would you say that there is any traditional tasks that is perhaps harder to move from the analog and physical office to the digital?
Yes.
What could that be?
Building trust, which is a very important parameter when we talk about flexible working. You have to trust people. It is better to build relations when you're face to face. It's easier and better to have conflict face to face. It doesn't work with an SMS. It's kind of escalate. So you have a lot of cases where it's better to be analog. And I'm not arguing that we're going to live in a digital palace in the future. I'm arguing that we have to be analog competent as well as digital competent, and we have to dose how we adjust the balance between the two. And coming back to the one argument here is, as the digital universe keep progressing, it'll have an influence on the analog. So what we can do today in the analog sphere, in the future we might be able to do better in the digital.
Okay, so thank you. And you also said something earlier when we talked about the different trends or drivers driving this change. And you mentioned technology, and
That's the obvious one.
that's the obvious one. And this week in Denmark, we've seen a court case that was decided in
High court.
yeah, and it was in favor of a person who tripped over a box in her home, working from home, getting some coffee. So just to outline it very quickly, she sued the company or wanted the company's insurance to pay for her
Compensation for
compensation.
a work-related incident.
Exactly. So is it a work-related incident if you trip over a box in your home getting coffee while at work? Yes, it is. So now the question, is the legal side of things or the judicial side of things holding this potential transformation back?
That was a tricky question, Toga. You didn't prepare me for that one. But the answer would be that there'll be different interpretation of this depending on the organization and the management. There'll be some management saying, once again, going back to cherry picking, well, this is a very good argument for you coming back into the office. But the reality and looking it without any prejudice, you would say this will just stipulate that working from home, you are also covered. And as long as you are more productive or the same, generating value for your company, it doesn't make sense to draw you back in to make less value for your company. So the clever organizations will most likely say it's not going to change anything. It's just going to stipulate, yes, you're working, yes, you're covered.
And a personal reflection when I read the discussion in the media is that if people are working more from home, and that will potentially increase, let's say, insurance claims for companies who have remote workers, shouldn't that at the same time lower the insurance price for the same companies in the workplace? I mean, it's an equilibrium, I would say, but let's not get bogged into the legal stuff. What I'm trying to get at more broadly is the drivers that are making this change possible, but also holding the change back outside of property management and digitalization. Another thing that we could perhaps discuss a bit more is culture. So from my perspective, it seemed like everybody was ready to work from home the second they got the chance. That's not necessarily normal that you can change a culture in 5 seconds.
You're talking back to the pandemic.
Yeah, now I'm talking about the pandemic, okay, where a lot of people all of a sudden got the chance or were forced to work from home,
yes,
rather.
And that caused a lot of problems. And then we're coming back to the binary approach where it's not 0 or 1, it's a combination. And culture, it's important, and relationships are important. What we should measure, coming back with a reflection on this, is what we should measure in the workplace, and we are measuring it mostly, engagement. So how do you make your employees the most engaged employees and the best version of them? And that might not be forcing them into the office or forcing them to stay at home all the time. You need to find the optimal solution for engagement, because engaged employees in a knowledge society where we have more knowledge workers, it's important. We're not factory workers anymore. So we're not working like Charlie Chaplin. And
some people are, though. And,
yeah.
But I take your point. So now we talked a lot about how we got to the place we are now, basically. So we have seen some drivers. We've discussed the world around, the way things look right now. So what would you say if we look forward for the next 5 or 10 years? What would be the the drivers to look at? What would be the technologies for organizations to pay attention to?
Well, we covered knowledge. We covered knowledge work, and we covered the digital sphere, which is going to move forward. On the flip side of the digital advancement, we will see that people become more analog competent. When we have, in the past, we've been analog incompetent. We used analog meetings, analog collaboration as a default. It was supposed to be the best. And as we're moving forward, we'll be more selective in using it. We will know when to use analog and when to use digital. That's covering the technology and infrastructure part. But one thing that we should really be alert on is ESG, meaning whether it's sustainable. It'll be quite a big driving force in the workplace moving forward. What is sustainable over time within the society framework that we work? It could be equality, could be inclusion, diversity, the whole green aspect. Are we efficient? Are we using too many resources in these analog palaces? So that'll be a driving force as well.
Okay, so that was basically two things, and I want to start with the first you mentioned, because I find it very interesting that you basically highlight that one of the things that leaders and decision makers should look to for the next years is to better leverage the analog. So if I understand, let me repeat your argument back to you, and then perhaps I've understood it correctly.
If you repeat it, I'll agree.
So as I understand what you're saying is that it used to be that the analog meetings and analog ways were default, so we took them for granted. Now that it's not a default, now that it's not one or the other, we need to be much more selective, and we need to realize the potential that analog meetings have, so that it's a tool we use for the right purposes. Is that correctly understood?
It's correct, and I'll give you an example. If we pre-pandemic, you'd ask for a meeting, and I would have said to you, we'll do it on Skype, or we'll do it on Teams, which was the Microsoft name of it. You would have said, well, it's kind of a downgrade, so you're not regarding this meeting as really important. Now, most meetings, in fact, are by default digital. So we meet in Zoom or Team, and then you make an upgrade, which is, no, I would like to invest the time, and the subject is sufficient, important, so we can meet face-to-face. So we're going from a default analog to a default digital meeting. And that's, in fact, showing us that we're becoming competent in navigating. And as we'll see the younger generation, and everybody's talking about Generation Z, and using them as kind of a breaking down walls. But what's, for me, interesting in the sphere of the office and the workplace, it's that Generation Z, we say they are digital native, but I normally say they're analog competent. They're the first generation that are sitting around, let's take a gamer, sitting and gaming together with his friends, and then he say, no, now we got to spend time together face to face. So he's very social in the digital sphere, and then he's selective and say, no, now we got to go out and be face to face.
Okay,
you understand?
I understand. Yeah, that makes sense. All right.
And they're going to challenge the management of the old management in the companies, are plus 50 white male sitting, and they are analog in most cases, incompetent. And I know it's provocative saying it, but nobody wants to be incompetent. But in fact, I'm a representative of that.
You said that they were analog,
incompetent.
Okay.
Because we use it by default.
Yeah.
We say that the digital is a kind of a downgrade, which is not true.
Yeah.
It's analog, which is an upgrade.
Okay, makes sense. And now back to the second part of your answer before, which was ESG. What are some of the pitfalls or the potential dangers of this hybrid workspace in the ESG area? So I would say, okay, we can talk about, or you can give examples from the climate aspect or the equality aspect or whatever you feel like.
Well, I'm also describing it in the book, which is most of what I'm saying now is in the book. So please buy it. But the case, let's say equality, and I'm putting it to the point where I'm saying that you cannot claim that you are really supporting equality in the workplace if you're not working proactively with flexibility, meaning having the possibility to work more remote, more or less. But because if you have families with children, and we're still in the area or in the time where most of the work tasks fall on the women.
At home.
At home.
Yeah.
And not at work, also at work, but especially at home. And if you're not working with flexibility, you cannot wholeheartedly say that you're working proactively with equality, because you're going to put the women in a tight spot, as well as the men, but more so the women. So if you work with the ESG, you have to work with flexibility. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And let me move on to something else then, because what objectives are guiding the redesign and utilization of the office workspace in the decade coming? I want to talk a little bit more about not what's right here right now, but more about what's coming for the next decade or so.
Well, I've kind of identified 5 different objectives, and the one and that might, and I'm coming back to return to office in the same sentence, but Denmark is it's a employee powered market, meaning the employees are very sought after. So we have low unemployment, etc., meaning the search to attract and retain talent is a very good reason to have flexibility, because we know one of the most sought after things from employees is flexibility. So if you wanted to attract and retain talent, you work with flexibility. So that's a key driver for many organizations. Then you go a little bit deeper, and then you say, I mentioned return to office. Mm. When we see, and that's across the globe, when we see companies, organizations that impose return to office policies, full-time or near full-time, they are working with a reason behind it, partially or fully, to reduce their workforce, which is a very dangerous way of reducing workforce, because you might lose the best talent. Mm. So if you're working in a sector where it's an employer market, then you could probably reduce your workforce if you're in a crisis by imposing full return to office. And we see that in many areas, also recently in the States in the administration. But that's one thing, and that's a key driver for flexibility, because it's thought after from the employees. Then I'm coming back to the digitization of the workplace and the work processes. We know for a fact that offices and workplaces that work proactive with flexibility become more digital, which is quite natural. But it's kind of, you enter a curve and you become more digital. So if you hold on to the analog full in office, you will slow down your need for digital development. So if you want to really embrace the digital worksphere, then you work proactive with flexibility. That was covering two.
That was only two, yeah. And I want to. I just had a thought when you mentioned the retaining of talent and attracting new talent. So you said that it's dangerous to not have the flexibility or to reduce flexibility as a way to lose staff because you might lose your best talent.
Yes.
So that made me think that perhaps there is for me at least, a small aha moment here that decision makers should not necessarily make decisions based on the average office worker, but rather on the best talents, because one, they're the one who can pick and choose between new jobs, and two, they are producing relatively more than the average, so that the best talent is much better than perhaps you would expect. Is there something there that it's even more important to retain your best talent and thereby making sure that you have the flexibility?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I'll put another, because some employers, they say, well, when the market change and there'll be more unemployment, then we can change the way we work with flexibility. And the answer to that is no, because you still want to attract and retain the best talent. And if that's an important parameter for the employees, then you shouldn't adjust it. Because once again, the one with the best offers will always go to the place where they get most. So you can't just take away flexibility, because it'll have grave implications for your productivity.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you. And now you mentioned productivity. I can see here that's one of the key objectives you've also written. So we have the attracting and retaining of talent. You mentioned efficiency. Productivity is also important, of course. We have the ESG and digitalization as the 5 key objectives. Is that correct?
Yes, and we always come back to and we all understand that having a smaller office, it'll lower our environmental footprint, and it'll lower our cost, all things being equal. That is efficiency. Mm. But productivity, all the studies show that as always is the case, if you do it cleverly, because if you do it stupid, you'll come out with a less result. But if you do it cleverly, you can increase your productivity, and overall, in having large sample and looking at all the studies, you can increase between 2 and 4 and 5%, something in that neighborhood. But I think you should look upon it a little bit more holistic and saying it might not be that the single worker you have today is producing more because he's saving on commute or whatever, or she. It's probably got more to do that you're able to attract and retain talent, get more engaged workers. You're becoming more digital. So all the things combined, they'll interact and in the end increase your productivity. So it's a question once again about balancing and trying to get the best out of the components on the table.
Yeah, and for the ESG thing that we also covered briefly, I just wanted to tell you about a thing that I've noticed. So short backstory: I live an hour from Copenhagen, we have full flexibility here, so I can come into the office.
And you have small children.
And I have small children, so I'm very happy about that. But the thing that I've noticed is that after Corona, after the pandemic, the traffic back into the city obviously rose by a lot. Now everybody have to come back into the office. And there was a few months, maybe even a year, where it was a pain getting to the office. A lot of traffic. Where I live, there is a lot of people working in the city. But now, here a few years out, it seems like we've reached an equilibrium, or perhaps even a slowing down. It basically gets easier and easier. I know that that's just one person's observation, but to me it seems like less and less people need to go into the office in general, based on that one data point. What do you make of that?
I would say not true, anecdotal. So you can't see it in the data. What you're saying is basically what you see is a flat line presently, but what I'm arguing for, it's not gonna last, that flat line. We might have reached a balance present where employees, the infrastructure, what it supports, but as we're moving forward, there'll be changes. And the changes is not going to move towards more analog. And I'm repeating myself now, saying we have to look at one side as a competition. And getting up in the morning, we have to look at one side saying, will it make more going into the office for me, for my team, and for the organization? Or will I produce more staying at home once again for what I have on my desk, working with my team, and for my organization? And if you say that you have to come into work predominantly, you are saying that the analog creates more value than the digital works fair. And I think you are heading for problems. Because if you add artificial intelligence, and I say, well, I have my little help on my side. And if I have my help on the side, what does that do for collaboration? How often do I need to interact? And how am I going to interact with my colleagues in the team? I don't know. Neither do you. But we both know it's going to change. It's going to change the way we interact. So it's coming back to this balance and the competition between the analog and the digital.
So let's get a little bit more concrete now. What would you say it takes now? So let's say that some of the people listening here and some of the people that you'll engage with in the future, they say, okay, I get your point. I understand the balance here. What can I do more concretely what actions can I take now?
Well, I've said it several times. This is not a static situation. So you cannot solve it with static solutions. You have to look at it as an evolving evolution or revolution. So the way you organize your workplace and the way that you look upon continuously making alterations and testing and finding new ways of working, it's going to shape the probability of success. So you really have to look at it as dynamic, and you have to establish collaborations across different functions within the company, and not just work in silos. You can't have HR. You started off asking, is this an HR question, or is it an IT question, or is it a real estate, facility management, or is it top management? Is it a finance question? The answer to that is it has to be a collaboration with mandates and resources. And before you establish that and have that collaboration, you cannot continuously adapt to the evolution. You didn't need the evolution and the revolution beforehand when it was a static solution. We built an office, we designed it, and every 3-4 years we came in and we put in another sofa and we rearranged the desks, and that was it. Now you're changing the whole ecosystem, and it's changing faster than we like, because we have to take sunk costs, we have to fail. So it's a difficult balance.
So now I'm going to give you a bit of an unfair question. So here at the Institute, one of the things that we are working a lot with is the methodology of Foresight. How does Foresight fit into this transformation or evolution?
So if I'm saying now it doesn't fit in, you'll be surprised.
But I know it does. But I know it does.
No, it basically if we worked in an environment that was relatively flatline, the evolution was not even an evolution; it was a very small adjustment. The foresight wouldn't play that an important role. But I'm going to quote Bill Gates I think it was on the 27th of March. He said that with artificial intelligence, that he saw that in the future we would only work 2 days a week. And that's a very sharp change. And if we're looking into, let's say, a 4-day work week within a decade, or we look in better digital solutions for collaboration, then we're looking into a radical change of the workplace and the office. And if you have to navigate that change, you better use foresight, because you better look a little bit ahead. You turn on your radar and start discussing and making priorities. What do you think is going to influence and what's important for our organization? So I'm now making a full state argument for using foresight, but you need foresight to be able to navigate this in the future.
Thank you so much, Claus. And before we turn off the cameras and go back home to our small children and eat our supper, let's get some of those questions from the audience. And Søren out back has been as kind as to pick some questions for me. So question number 1. Claus, you mentioned designing the analog office to fit the digital office, not the other way around. How exactly would that look like in practice?
Well, if most of us have looked a little bit into this, it's a place where we use the analog office at its best. I'm not saying that they're not going to be workers who have a tendency to come into work and isolate themselves and sit at a desk. But we all can acknowledge that sitting at a desk might not be the best way to use an office. Sitting alone, working, you could do that. If you have a desk at home, it'll probably be better doing it at home. But the office in the future will be a place of collaboration and building relationships and doing all the things that the analog is best for. So the design will change dramatically. It's going to be a lot more playful, and it's going to be a lot more relation building. We'll see, it's not just a question about attracting people to the office, because we shouldn't see it as a competition. It should be seen as a place where we make engagement. And once you're engaged and you build strong relationships, and especially a relationship with your colleagues and your manager, if those relations are strong, you are engaged, and engaged workers produce more.
All right, thank you. Let's take one more here. We have a question that says, I find that the challenge is to agree on what to do synchronously and asynchronously. What are the futures related to those modes of working? Basically, when are we at work at the same time? If we're working remote or we're working digitally, the time is sort of up in the air now.
Yes, and it'll become more up in the air.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we all, in many senses, working non-linear and working, we can just send an email and then you can pick your time when to work and when not to answer. It'll increase. But at the same time, and then we're coming back to the analog digital, there are times when it's best that we are in the same time and the same place like we are now. And then there'll be other times when we can be more productive, where we're not in the same time and place and space. So, but there'll be increased possibility in the future to work non-linear, asynchronized, and asymmetric. So it'll increase.
Fantastic. Then I will group two questions together because both of them are not necessarily about office work, but about work in general. So we have a question that says...
Where I bought my shirt? No.
No. So we have a question about the job opportunities in rural areas apart from remote work. And then let's lump that together with a question about the future of work that cannot be done remotely. So nursing or craftsmanship. So how do you see these drivers and forces impacting those types of jobs?
Coming back to the statement saying that all employees want flexibility, or strive for flexibility. But flexibility is interpreted differently depending on the function you have. So there'll be some knowledge workers in one end of the scale, they'll be completely flexible. We call them digital nomads or whatever presently. And then you have on the other end of the scale, if you're a nurse, you have to be present with your patient at the workplace at given times. So you're very restricted. And what we will see increasingly, and there have already been experiments into this, it's having influence on when to work and how to work. So your flexibility is being interpreted into co-deciding your time. And there's been some dramatic raises in engagement and being able to attract and retain. So once you made, let's say you work with a 4-week schedule, then you ask all the employees to give their feedback. How will this schedule work best for you? They give all their feedback, you feed it all into the algorithm, and the algorithm come out and say, well, we could meet 95% of your requirements. 5%, you have to sacrifice your time for the team. And then people go away with that and saying, well, I can work Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday I couldn't, but there I have family stuff, and then I go again Friday next week. So you have influence on your time. That's flexibility.
Fantastic. Let's have one last question. And I think it's a really interesting one. It's around the concept of specialization. And I suppose it's related also to you mentioned that we should break down silos and structures. So here's the question. How's the concept of specialization evolving, and will the future job market increasingly require individuals to have multiple skill sets rather than relying on expertise in just one area?
Keeping the answer simple is a very good question. But I would argue for specialization. And the reason why I argue for specialization is that when we look at all the statistics and looking at the next generation entering the job market, we're looking at their expected span of employment of about 3 years. So you'll have a lot of different employers, and to be able to move on and have a progression in your professional life, you would require you to be specialized. and the employer would also seek specialized workers because they are easier to, I'm saying exploit sounds negative, but in the sense they easily fit in and they start producing fast. So if you employ specialists, you can get a lot of benefit out of them, even though that they only stay for 3 years.
All right.
So more specialization.
Thank you so much, Claus.
It's not a good answer if you're a generalist.
Which I am, so thank you so much. All right, Claus, if anybody wants to get in contact with you around your new book or about the future of work in general, how can they reach you?
They'll find me on the SIF's homepage.
Yeah.
So more than welcome.
Fantastic. And thanks again for everybody tuning in. Thanks for all the questions. And most of all, thank you, Claus, for joining us to discuss your new book.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Same to you. Thank you.